Hello, everyone. Welcome to Jamaica 411. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm your host, Michelle Stern. Well, fact checked, illicit 10. How many of you heard Mark Golding refer to an illicit 10? Illicit 10 parliamentarians, of course. How many of you remember hearing him say so in the debate? Well, I have news for you. And the news I have for you is going to make you very, very surprised indeed. Very surprised. And it will be coming from the Integrity Commission's annual report, which was tabled in the Parliament sometime in July of this year. And of course, we didn't have time to check that out because, there were many, many excitements. And now that the excitements have died down a bit, it's now time to return to business as usual.
Dr. Holness, government members have recommended taking the Auditor General off the Integrity Commission. There have been changes made by your administration to the Office of Political Ombudsman that have virtually destroyed its effectiveness as a check on the behavior of politicians. And there have been constant attacks by members of your administration on the Integrity Commission and on media and civil society groups that criticize your administration. Shouldn't Jamaicans be concerned about what appears to be a pattern by your administration of undermining oversight bodies in the public sector, civil society, and media?
There is absolutely no attempt by my administration and indeed myself to undermine any oversight body. Indeed, we have acted to strengthen and make them far more efficient. In placing the oversight of the political ombudsman under the office of the Electoral Commission, that's a move to strengthen and give it far more institutional framework. I myself have been very complimentary and acted in a very dignified way as it relates to the Integrity Commission.
Mr. Golding will have the opportunity to respond.
There has been a definite pattern of hostility from the Jamaica Labour Party government towards the institutions mentioned in the question, in particular the Integrity Commission, largely because it is well known that there are at least 10 members of Parliament who are under investigation for illicit enrichment, that there are at least 10 members of Parliament who are under investigation for illicit enrichment, a serious corruption offence, of which the only one to be known is the one for whom a report has been completed and sent to the Parliament, which is you, Andrew. As a result of that, they have done their very best to try to neuter that critical institution, including the Prime Minister bringing that institution to court to undermine its effectiveness and indeed eliminate it entirely.
So there was the Englishman lying as usual about the reason why the Prime Minister took the Integrity Commission to court. He said that it was to undermine their effectiveness and eliminate it entirely. Right? Holness took the Integrity Commission to court in an effort to get them to certify his statutory declarations, which they have been refusing to do, giving one excuse after another. First, the impression was given that if the FID did not complete their report and submit it to the Integrity Commission, Craig Beresford would not have certified Holness's statutory declarations. Then, when the matter went before the court, all of a sudden, it is not the FID's report they are waiting on. They are waiting on, according to them, confirmation of the source of funding for the companies, Holness's 3 companies. Well, there are in fact now 2. So they have been attempting to delay the certification by whatever means they're able to, and they succeeded. The election was called, the election went, and no doubt this non-certification would have affected some of the results, some of the persons who may not have turned out to vote because they believe that the Prime Minister ought to be certified and he is not. and they don't know what the situation is. So the Integrity Commission, whether it was their intent, yes or no, I am suspicious and believe it was their intent, but then that's my opinion, took a decision to delay the certification of Holness's statutory declarations by claiming that they are sending the matter to the FID for further investigation. When they had the opportunity to do so, they refused to do so and went and engaged a foreign forensic expert, auditing expert, the same type of investigation that FID would use. And when that person failed to come up with anything in terms of how they interpret the transactions between the three companies, and having nothing to go on, suddenly they decided they want the FID to further check. That must be a deliberate attempt on their part to delay the certification. When the matter went before the court and they realized that they are in some kind of trouble, Craig Beresford, in his second affidavit, in response to Holness's second affidavit, stated that all that is required for certification is for Andrew Holness to provide the source of funding for his three companies. That is what they say they're waiting on, for that to be confirmed. So there was clearly an about turn. And despite the fact that I did a video and pointed out that has already been done, that in the investigators' report that was tabled in the Parliament the 5th of September 2024, the investigator Kevin Stevenson asked Holness in every instance for the source of funding for whether it be shares, cash, or any other kind of assets. And in every instance, he was given the source of funding and then he checked it against the institutions from which the money came from. But when it comes to the matter of the number of persons who are being investigated for illicit enrichment, you heard Mark Golding saying that there were 10. Now, you remember it started out as 6, and then it went to 8, and now he's saying that there are 10. Now, we are here to find out whether there are indeed 10 parliamentarians being investigated for illicit enrichment. And for that information, we must now turn to the Integrity Commission's annual report. And it is in that report that they tell us how many persons are being investigated and for what. So it begins Information and Complaints Division referrals. Now remember, the Information and Complaints Division, that is the division in the Integrity Commission that receives the statutory declarations. And it is or was Craig Beresford who was the Director of Information and Complaints. So that is the body within the Integrity Commission that receives all the statutory declarations submitted. So it continues, during the reporting period, the following referrals were made. Now we're going to the other section. It says offenses under the Integrity Commission Act 2017 and the Corruption Prevention Act 2001 for the financial year April 1, 2024 to March 31, 2025. So this is the period from last year to March of this year. And these are the offenses that were committed under the two acts. So the offenses that we're interested in are making false statements on a statutory declaration as well as illicit enrichment. And the only public servants that we're interested in are the parliamentarians who may have committed these offenses. So I want you to remember now that the period we're looking at is last year. So if we find that there are indeed investigations into illicit enrichment as well as making false statements in the statutory declarations for last year, then these would now be new investigations that were opened. And then you add these new investigations to any investigation of the past that remains open. And then you get the total number of investigations for illicit enrichment as well as false statements. Follow? Yes, so these would be new investigations. So, what would have happened? When the statutory declarations were submitted and the Director of Information and Complaints examined them, or some number of them, he concluded that the declaration was not complete. He would have contacted the declarant to ask certain questions. If they failed to answer the questions within the period, then the matter would be referred to the commissioners for further investigations. If, on the other hand, they use a formula and discovered that the assets and the income are not matched, that the declarant has assets that exceeds their lawful income, which is illicit enrichment, then they would refer the matter again to the commissioners for further investigations. So that is what would have happened. And if indeed they left something out, and the Director of Information and Complaints is of the view that it may have been deliberate, then he would refer the matter to the commissioners for further investigation for false statements, making false statements in a statutory declaration. See? Yes. All right. So let's now bring this a little closer so we can see if there were any new investigations involving any of our parliamentarians. So here are the two offenses underlined. First one, providing false information. It says Section 43 2A of the Integrity Commission Act 2017 and Section 15 2B of the Corruption Prevention Act of 2001. Investigation. Look under the column that says parliamentarians. As you can see, two. So there are two parliamentarians. Could be an MP, could be a senator, that is now under investigation for making false statements in their statutory declarations. That's two new investigations. Then, when we look below to illicit enrichment under Section 14 and 15 of the Corruption Prevention Act 2001, it says investigation. Look again under the column of parliamentarians. As you can see, there are two parliamentarians that are being investigated for illicit enrichment, and these are two new cases. Okay? Yes. So when you add the two, we have four. So for last year, there were four parliamentarians who were referred for investigations by the Director of Information and Complaints to the commissioners. It is important that we know that it is possible that the same persons who are being investigated for illicit enrichment may well be the same persons who are being investigated for making false statements in the statutory declaration. So we don't know. So it is a minimum of two or a maximum of four parliamentarians that are being investigated. But it doesn't matter. There are four investigations, and that is what is important. So we have four new cases. So what we're going to look at next is how many of the previous cases remained opened. And for that information, we go to the matrix of statutory declarations, examination, and outcomes. And it says here, the table below provide details of the matrix of statutory declarations, examination, and outcomes during the period April 1, 2018 to March 31, 2025. So this now is for the entire period that the Integrity Commission has been in existence. So what we'll be looking at is the total number of offenses that they have been investigating, those that are closed and those that are still open. And that would include last year because it said during the period 2018 to 2025. So that would also include the four new cases that were open last year. Follow? Yes. So let us go on. Now, the column that we are particularly interested in is the second to last column. It says number of public officials referred for investigation for potential illicit enrichment and or false information. So these are the numbers now that were referred. And remember, these numbers include the 4 that was open last year. Don't forget that. Very important. So the two groups that we're interested in would be the members of parliament and members of the Senate. So for the members of parliament between 2018 and 2025, there were 13 MPs that were referred for investigation for potential illicit enrichment and false statement. So that's 13. When we look at the members of the Senate, there was only one senator who was referred for investigation for potential illicit enrichment and or making false information in their statutory declarations. So that now brings us a total of 14 parliamentarians from 2018 up to March 31, 2025 that were referred for further investigations. 14, and that now would include the 4 from last year. So now we know the total number of parliamentarians that were referred for investigations. Let's now look to see if any of those cases were closed or referred to the Director of Corruption Prosecution. And to get that information, we must look at the outcomes. It says matrix of referral outcomes. The table below provides details of the matrix of referral outcomes during the period April 1, 2018 to March 31, 2025. Again, this is over the course of the entire period of this particular Integrity Commission that was formed under the Integrity Commission Act of 2017. Now, the column that we're interested in would be if you look at the top, you'll see that it's divided into two columns. The top line of the second column says potential illicit enrichment and or false information, and that's underlined in red. So it says number of closures after investigations preliminary inquiry. So we're looking now at the number of closures. So the matter would have been referred, an investigation would have been done, or a preliminary investigation would have been done, and then the matter was closed. That's what that is saying, because they found no evidence of wrongdoing. In the second to last column, it says number of rulings to charge or prosecute. So this is saying that when the Director of Investigation completes his investigation, he may come to the conclusion that an offense was committed. The matter would then be referred to the Director of Corruption Prosecution for action. And in the final column, it says number of rulings not to charge. So we are interested again in the MPs and the senators. So let's have a look. Now it says for the members of parliament, when it comes to those cases that were potential illicit enrichment and or false information, it says a number closures after investigation or preliminary inquiry. 6. So of the 14 referrals on further investigation, they decided to close 6 of them for the parliamentarians. Remember, there were 13 parliamentarians that were referred for illicit enrichment and or making false statements in their statutory declarations. Of that 13, 6 of them, those cases were closed, leaving only 7. It then says number of rulings to charge or prosecute, and that was 1. So that now would have been 7 from 13, which leaves 6. And for that ruling to charge, number of rulings not to charge, 1. So we know we're talking about Andrew Holness's case. So what do we have here when it comes to the members of parliament? Of the 13 total referrals, 6 of them were closed and 1 was sent forward to be prosecuted. That means there were 7 cases that were closed. 7 from 13 leaves 6. When it comes to the members of the Senate, as you can see, there is nothing there, blank. And what this is saying is that last year, that was the first time a senator would have been referred for either illicit enrichment or making false statements in a statutory declaration. So we have 6 remaining plus the senator, which would now make it 7. There are 7 cases that were referred and 7 that were closed. Now remember, last year there were 4 additional cases, so those were included in this 7 that remains open. Now, if this is the case, then what it means is that only 3 of the cases of the parliamentarians that were referred for illicit enrichment and making false statements in their statutory declarations, only 3 remain of those older cases, because 4 new cases came on, and when you minus the 4 from the 7, you get 3. So when the Englishman said at the national debate
that there are at least 10 members of parliament who are under investigation for illicit enrichment.
was that true? I don't think so. And so there you have it, folks. We have made a very important discovery that at least 7 of the parliamentarians were able to provide the Integrity Commission with their source of income for the assets that they held. And that must be very good news, because it don't look good that we should have our parliamentarians under investigations for corruptions. Do you agree with me? Yes. So let us recap. From 2018 to March 31, 2025, there were a total of 14 referrals for illicit enrichment and making false statements in the statutory declarations, which were submitted by parliamentarians. Of the 14 referrals, 6 were closed and 1 was referred to the Director of Corruption Prosecution, who ruled not to charge. So in total, of the 14, 7 were closed, which left 7 open. So there are now only 7 open cases. But what is important that I want you to know is that of the original illicit 6, 8, and 10, only 3 of those cases remain open. And it meant, of course, that the parliamentarians were able to demonstrate to the Integrity Commission the source of funding for their assets. And it also meant that the persons who were being investigated for making false statements, they were able to convince them that it was inadvertent. You follow me? Yes. So I thought I'd bring you this bit of good news. I'm sure everyone will be happy to hear that some number of the parliamentarians were able to clear up their problems that they had with the Integrity Commission. Well, that's it for me today. I want to thank you for joining me. I hope I was able to bring some information to you. And if you appreciate it, please give the video a thumbs up, share, subscribe, and of course, leave your comments in the comments section. Until next time, take very good care of yourselves and walk good.